You are live.
Hello, world. Welcome aboard, all you ground troops spinning around smartly on the planet. We are here with the TJ3B command ship with three of your best producers, authors, and co hosts. So the three of us together have come together for whatever reasons in human avatar form, and I hope you'll stick with us in 3D reality for a little while. If not, give us at least an hour because most of our friends that are going to be speakers at the alien event with me at least do 2 hour shows. But we've cut ours back to an hour because there's three of us, and we're going to have some of those speakers from alien event in the future. But in the meantime, you've got me, Bret, and Janet. We all have our own shows, but we come together once a week to have this command. So I'm going to turn it over to Bret Lueder, author, producer, co-host, and Janet Carroll Lessin. By the way, Bret's in California, Janet is in Hawaii, and I'm in your great state of Texas. So we are spread all over. We are Americans. Americans. All right, Bret, and then Janet. Say a little bit, please.
America, pew pew pew. Uh, Hi, my name is Bret Lueder. It's always a pleasure to join these two wonderful ladies in this live broadcast. We never know what we're going to get because we got guests that sign up and then sometimes they slip out the back door. I think they see our question list and then go running for the hills. And so that's the case today, but we've rescheduled already, so it's just going to be us three. And I'm not exactly sure what we're going to talk about, but I have a feeling that it's going to get pretty juicy pretty quick. What do you think, Janet?
I think so. I don't know what we're going to talk about. I never know half the time what's going to come out of my mouth, right? It's just like things flow, the flow of consciousness, right? So, what do you want to talk about right now? Okay, what's alive? What's juicy in your life right now? So, for me, I'm writing books. I have 3 books queued up. And when I think of something, I'll go to the appropriate book and I'll write a couple sentences or paragraphs or chapter. I will do some research on it. So then that makes an article, and then I pull the articles together because I think it's time to really wake up the planet and help us become conscious and enlightened. Otherwise, we might go down the drain. We might be the last generation. So we're really at this crossroads. Like, you see those things in the street, they have cartoons and they have all these directions that you can go. Well, that's what it feels like to me, that we have all these potentials. They call them timelines, future histories, potentials. And so I had a big, powerful dream last night. I said to Sasha, I'm going for a sabbatical for a month. And I called Nibiru, Australia in my dreams. So I went to Nibiru for a month and I had all this stuff happen. And then he came in just as I was waking up. It's like we're tuned into each other psychically. And it's like, wow, I just got back. If you would have come 10 minutes earlier, 5 minutes earlier, I would have still been in this journey. But I just now returned. And my cat is so sensitive. She comes up and she touches me and she hugs me. She knows that she's like my co-pilot. She knows when I'm returning and she, sends me waking up and she does this really cute paw thing. Anyway, um, so I keep getting these downloads about what's going on and how to do it. So my download was basically to get the information out there, to take off any kind of filters and censors that we have, and just blast it out there and tell our personal truth and speak it. Because Theresa and I have had this incredible history of interactions with aliens, even from before we came here. I've been studying near death experiences, life after life. I've had 8 near death experiences myself. Before you come here to take form as a human being, you decide the potentialities of what you're going to do in this timeline. It's not set in stone, but here's like an outline, and then you come in and flesh it out. So, by all likelihood, yeah, that's Michael Newton. Thank you for
Michael
putting that
Newton.
up. So, in all likelihood, we knew each other before, and we're acting out the scenarios that we set the parameters before we came in here. And we probably are part of the same soul group or the Karas, they call it. So I'm going to turn it over. Who wants to talk? Raise your little pinky. Who wants to take the talking stick now? Okay. Theresa, you're getting the talking stick. Brandon, that's all you ever did.
Well, I'm only here, I'm just visiting this planet, folks. I want to make sure you know that I believe alien civilizations exist, okay? And I'm listening and I'm researching and I sit and I watch all these channels that people say are broadcast media, information, disinformation, misinformation, and I'm trying to compare it with the life I've had. And, my life has not been exactly normal, whatever that is. Ask any psychiatrist, well, what is normal to you? I've done that, been there, got that T-shirt. So I've been trying to find something wrong with me and taking tests and all kinds of stuff, and nobody will give me that. So I guess I'm just going to have to be eccentric and paranormal. And I've been a parapsychologist most of my life, because when I was young, I died and went to the other side, okay? And after that, I was always looking with curiosity. I mean, every child has curiosity. But what Janet said, okay, about life between lives, that's what I was looking for. I really believe I was looking for my way back home. And then after I had these beings visit me as a child, I died I died with hepatitis. So everybody that I've met didn't have that, and my parents told me to keep my mouth shut. And I was told, not to talk about this stuff. And then in junior high, I was telling my seventh grade teacher about the planets and stuff, and she assured me I was not from this planet. So I don't know where you get your information from, but I was always sort of the outcast. Yeah. So, after a while, I just learned not to talk about it. And so I went into law enforcement investigations, and then I died during that time. I was an intern for NASA. I met Chris Kraft. I got to hear Bogey 10 o'clock high. And so I knew that there were people that existed already in my own mind, but NASA wouldn't let me talk about it either, but Chris Kraft would. And we would go to secret meetings, okay? He was the flight director.
Okay, so that's something you haven't said before. So you got recognized by Chris Kraft, and you were talking about your alien experiences, and he said, let's talk about it, right? Is that what you're saying? I'm going to make sure I'm hearing this. So you went to secret meetings. Who was in the meeting?
Just people, men, secret meetings with astronauts.
They were secret, Janet.
They were really secret. Did you know any of these people?
Dr. Mitchell, Edgar Mitchell, he was back then they were astronauts. But different astronauts. And Ken Johnston, Ken, he came to one or two. And it had a lot to do with high-minded scientists mainly, but Ken was a video projector guy, so he had film at one time. I met him at NASA in the room one time when one of the men came. But, this is all history now, and I'm trying to get it all together in my mind.
We don't know the history, so please.
Yeah, it's an interesting life.
What did you talk about in the meetings? Because you started this with, I was talking about my ET experiences. So what did you say at the meeting?
We talked about my ET experiences. They wanted to know what I knew. Well, about going up I told them about, when I had gone up on I wasn't supposed to talk to anybody, but my husband at the time assured me, because he worked for Chris Kraft too, right? So his dad worked for Grumman, and that's how my husband, during the Vietnam War, he had 5 scholarships. He was real smart. And about us being recruited in May 67, right, outside the James Bond movie. So we'd been recruited and then went to work at NASA, but I got pregnant, so I couldn't fulfill my duty as an intern. But my husband did that so he wouldn't have to go. It was all a concocted plan. Now, that's a long story,
so
how you keep a man from war.
So he didn't have to go to Vietnam, is that?
He didn't want to go. He had an E1 rating, even though he had 5 scholarships. He wasn't married and had a baby. So he said, not a problem. He'd get married and have a baby.
We have to tell our audience, back then,
what?
If you had a baby and a wife, you weren't drafted. There was a period there where if you had a baby, then they didn't send you over there. Because you're glossing over this like high speed, but we're gonna unpack this. Because our audience.
Well, we don't have that much time. I'm just trying to go over boom, boom, boom.
What else are we going to talk about? This is hot. Okay.
That's what books are for. Write all the details.
Okay, so why don't we pass the talking stick to Bret? Go ahead, Bret.
So, Theresa, what is a BNOC?
was always told that was the undisclosed, like in the movie Alias. They had like an SD6 division or a special ops or a black ops division. So when I came in, when I learned about that, I was in an Air Force uniform in San Antonio when I was doing my secret agent in and out of uniforms like the girl on Alias, even though it's like 20 years old. My sister tells me I was only introduced to it this year.
Explain what Alias is. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I've never seen it either.
Oh,
Don't
God.
do that. Don't use another example.
All right. What you do in this reality is you look for patterns and symbols for the human mind so the neuropaths can connect, right? Unlike some people we know that don't have that ability. But most people do if they're in human form. So what we do is we'll watch television movies to relate to each other. That way, no matter where we're at on Earth, we have global capacity for movies, television. That's why it'll always be there. Alias was by Jennifer Garner, which my sister, her husband's a forensic scientist, and he was very smart and had at least 2 degrees. She married him, I guess, right after the war in the 80s, but they're real smart. She's an RN nurse. So they started watching Alias, and I just found out about it since I moved here back to Texas, and I'm in part of their lives now. So they introduced it to me a few weeks ago, and we're already up to 4. So I moved from California. I moved from California a long time ago. I had an office there for 5 years, but from California, I went to Hawaii. Oh, Lord. Anyway, I was in Gulf Breeze, Florida. So I went over there to do an investigation. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, he's passed. But what it is basically all these things connect. And what we're finding out is, even today when I was watching the SALT talks, a gentleman came on with a huge background as an astronaut or in astrophysics, and he was talking about how interesting the reality is today. And this was in the last 6 days on the SALT talk, because they're realizing we don't have the full idea of what our reality is. So I feel like that between the ones that I knew about and accepted, that NASA knew existed as Bogey 10 o'clock high in their reality because they saw it on the screens, and we had it recorded. And if you haven't seen that, I've got a copy of that film. I can bring it up next week or something.
Film you're talking about now, I got lost.
The NASA film that says Bogey 10 o'clock high.
So Theresa,
okay.
So a BNOC is designates an acronym, BNOC, for some kind of a special agent?
Yes.
Okay.
What does BNOC stand for?
Yes.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I used to know, but I don't. It's wiped out my mind. But what's happened is I've lived so many years that a lot of things that took on precedence at one time, they were important because I was young and in a uniform or out of uniform and flying all over the world and doing things. I'm no longer that person. So I'm now I'll be 73 this year. And, I'm just sort of helping Bret because Bret said he wanted to come out with public relations on Ascension. And then lo and behold, somehow Saeed and me got together, and I'm going to talk at the alien event, and the little signs are behind me. So I guess I get to be one of the speakers. And I'm going to try to put this story together, how all of this, all of our intelligence, all of our spacecraft, our Allied Command, our Space Command, all of this, it really does go together in disclosure.
Okay, I want to go round robin. So when somebody's talking too long, I'm going to keep passing the ball.
Okay, Bret, and you.
Okay,
I'll
so
mute.
Okay,
I'm mute.
So what I was doing in the research was looking at when the presidents became aware. So I want to ask Bret, in your research, when did it start? Was it Roosevelt? Was it who was the first one to really be in the loop that you've discovered?
You're talking about presidents.
Which president? Where did it start? I think that they were in the know. I think that there was a long period that they were in the know. And I have information that Reagan knew, and Kennedy knew, and So do they all know, or is there some that don't know?
It depends how far back you want to go, and there's people that claim that the United States or Germany or Japan had done trips to Mars in the 30s.
Right.
So so to say that our presidents back then didn't know what was going on, all the world governments to a large degree know what the other governments are up to on those clandestine levels. Um, you know, I think for sure everyone would agree that studies UFOs that Eisenhower is probably the first president where you could say for sure Eisenhower knew what was going on, and that really kicks off the whole modern UFO era. Is the Greada Treaty, which he supposedly signed. There's very little evidence to suggest that, but as I talk about in my upcoming book, Agents of Ascension, UFO PR, even if that wasn't signed, there's definitely a lot of evidence to show that some kind of contract was signed. And so Eisenhower really is where I think it picks up. If ufology is in the mainstream at all, Eisenhower and the Greada treaties, one of those starting points where you don't necessarily need to know what came before that, although I find that history very fascinating. But if you pick up where Eisenhower starts, you really get the whole breadth of the golden era of UFOs and when contact starts and the military involvement. And, the whole transition over to Kennedy is a real interesting time because that's when they were trying to not let the president have so much of a no and a say in what's going on. So they try to keep Kennedy out of it. And I know I read Sala's book. He makes a solid case that, in the book Kennedy's Last Stand, which is one of the books I really like about Sala. There's a couple others I don't. We don't need to talk about those. But Kennedy, one of the reasons they had to off him.
Do you think he ran that Project Serpo? He was behind Project Serpo?
I think that came a little bit later. That came a little bit later
he set it up. Apparently, he was instrumental in arranging that to happen.
Okay, if I wasn't aware of that, if that's true, but my information is that Serpo started in the 70s. Maybe it had roots in the 60s before Kennedy was killed, obviously, but that's the early 60s. You pick it up in the 70s, and they supposedly that's when the exchange happens, and then they were going to release E.T. the extraterrestrial as part of a public relations campaign to try to soften the image and perception of the gray aliens, because most mainstream society would, see them as like demons or hideous in some way, and that wouldn't be conducive to good relations. So if Kennedy had something to do with that, that's news to me. But I guess it wouldn't really surprise me because the Kennedys seem to be coming around again.
He get killed because he knew too much. That's part of the theory, is that he was going to release the information.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's at least part of the reason why they had to off him. Of course, there's the Cuba situation, which involved different clandestine figures and groups, but then also the money. He wanted to reintroduce silver to back the money, and the bankers can't have that. That's been a struggle ever since they removed the gold in 1933 officially. And then so for all those reasons, Kennedy had to go, and I think that's just a perfect storm. Otherwise, you'd see a lot of more other presidents being killed too for various like single things. Kennedy had those three going for him, and there was just too many people that I think ganged up to want him gone. So presidents and UFOs, I think since Kennedy, the presidents have had a lot less knowledge of what's happening in America, at least in terms of UFOs. And I think that has been delegated, coerced to be the authority of the MJ-12. So
what about Nixon? Did he take Lessin to see the bodies?
Great question, right? Jackie Gleason is
what do you think? Theresa, what do you think about Nixon? You're muted. And then we want to talk about Reagan. So go ahead. What do you think about Nixon taking
when I came in?
What do you think about Nixon taking Jackie Gleason to see the bodies?
Oh, in Florida? Oh, I think
wherever
it's
they were.
great. I think it's great. Yeah, that was his buddy. Yeah, what about it?
Well, do you
Here, I'll
think
take
it's real or
my.
not?
Let me take my buds out and see if I can hear better.
Yeah, don't mute
Folks, I'm
me.
sorry. It's decay of the Clayborn. I'm a Clayborn on this planet as a humanoid. Can you hear me now, Janet?
Yes. Okay. So we're talking about Nixon, and then we're going to go to Reagan, and I guess Carter. See, that's where we get. I get the food back. When you,
Oh, I go. I think it goes back to Carl.
you got to put your
My
headphones
story with
on.
the UFO thread. Wait,
It's
am I
creating
echoing?
feedback. Yeah, put your
Am I
Janet's
echoing?
echoing.
put your buds back. on.
Janet's echoing.
No, you're echoing.
Janet's echoing? What does my earphones have to do with Janet echoing? Okay,
Ask StreamYard.
whatever. I guess we're all united synchronistically. Okay, whatever. It's always seems to be me and my problem, but okay. All right. I think that the presidents, it's really based on when we went into space with nuclear weapons, because from what I can understand, everything that I've been involved in was nuclear. So I had to have at least a Q clearance, but I had above top secret, what we call
So when did we do
SCI,
that?
or special
When did we go
compartmentalized.
into space with nuclears? You're saying when? So what year are you talking about? When did we go?
We're
into space
talking
with
about
nuclear?
the Philadelphia experiment,
So we're talking about the 1943.
TVA and cold fusion, and what we made the atomic bomb. So that would have been when we brought in Oppenheimer. So 43, the thread starts in the ufology business, and my business as a ufologist with Carl Lorenzen is when I start my story by request for, if you want to go back in the historical documents with the government, we have some old footage of films, and Stanton T. Friedman did one as well. But we have proof of on the United States archives with various stages. We can get in disclosure if they want to believe the National Archive films, and then we have different things. But I definitely feel like Roosevelt was involved, and then now Herbert Hoover was a big important player, right? Because he wanted to control all
Right.
intelligence. Did everybody remember J. Edgar Hoover? And then
Right.
Bret, when was Herbert Hoover? And there's J. Edgar Hoover, and then there's Harry S. Truman. Harry S. Truman was my president when I came on board the planet. Harry S. Truman, and he was very nice, and he
Well, you
knew
were
of
alive
it.
with Eisenhower because I was alive with Eisenhower.
Yes.
When I was
Well,
born,
Truman was before Eisenhower.
Okay, right. Okay.
Yes. So if we
Roosevelt,
go by
Truman.
presidents,
Okay, I wasn't here when Truman was president. Okay.
oh, okay. Well, I was. So we don't all know everything. We only know preferably what we want to know and what we keep in our memory banks, and then
So
a
what
lot
do
of
you
that goes
know
away,
about
especially.
Reagan. Let's go Reagan.
The presidents,
Did you know
I think
Reagan?
that it's a political ploy, but it wasn't really a big political issue until George Bush got in as the CIA director, and from Central Intelligence, right? And he is the big guy for helping intelligence get out there about. Well, I don't know if you'd say UFOs or not, but we definitely knew he knew. But
We're
Ronald
talking about the
Reagan and then President
extraterrestrial
Carter.
Wait, so slow down. You're going over. Let's hone this in because you're going. Wait. Okay, we're talking about when the presidents were in the know. Are they still in the know? And I know that you had told me in a lot of stories about what Reagan knew because he was at the Camp David, and he was being debriefed about the extraterrestrial presence on Earth. So that's what we're talking about,
Right.
the extraterrestrial presence on Earth.
Well, you didn't mention Reagan, but yes, Reagan, President Reagan. I was going through Carter, Reagan, but it was
Right.
Carter that got Reagan, and they helped each other on that little dilly. But
let's
yeah,
hear about
UFOs
that.
are
Okay,
always an
what-
undercover
blurt
story.
out. What
It's
did
overt.
Carter help Reagan with? What did Carter help Reagan with?
Well, everything,
You said
including
it.
the
You
Iran
said-
Contra. Well,
Okay, we're talking
Janet,
about
if
the
we're gonna,
extraterrestrial- We're talking about
if we go back before, let me tell you, Carter was before. Carter knew, and so
Okay,
that
that's
became. They had to hush him up. But okay, they hushed him up. So
How
if you
did they
look
hush
at
him
it,
up?
it was George Bush probably,
How
intelligence.
did they,
It's a
quote unquote,
controlled.
say, hush up Carter?
I think our government has an opportunity to keep the military industrial complex, as we usually say in conspiracy theories at one time or another. There has always been those that are in charge of intelligence that didn't want to lose their place. And with the FBI, we had J. Edgar Hoover, did we not? So we have many people. It's not one person. And usually the person that gets in charge as the public relations expert or the CEO or the man in front knows the least. Who the people put into power doesn't mean he gets all the power, knows everything. That's what Clinton told us and Obama. But it wasn't until Obama came in and said Area 51 that it became declassified. And I heard that from Joanna, whatever her name is. But anyway, the thing is, every president wanted to know. And I believe the question was back in the day was which ones really knew. So I think Truman knew. I think from the time that we released and we became nuclear, that is when the extraterrestrials made themselves known. But the story I go by from space, from Andromeda and the Galaxy Allied Command, is that they were always there and God has always been. And when we stepped down through the Allied Command, the Supreme Council, and the Ennead Nine, and then the people like you do Star Trek, and into our filming Galaxy Federation, we step it down to when did man first know that there was contact on the planet? I would say that was during World War II, because that is what fact shows me as a investigator.
Was that when Roosevelt was still alive? Did it start with Roosevelt?
Before Eisenhower, yes.
Well, there was.
I can't pull up all the dates, but
okay. Bret, do you have a question?
My mother and my grandmother were alive when World War II and Portugal. My relatives, some of them were Jewish from Portugal. So my mother in her book talked about sitting at the radio listening to Hitler invading Poland. Excuse me, we were from Poland. Yeah, but I've been to Portugal and Spain. But anyway, it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter what our DNA is. But the nuclear assessment is we became a level 1 planet when we discovered nuclear power. Now, we were working on cold fusion. We hadn't got there yet, and I'll be discussing that probably at the alien event if they allow me to. And the theories that I have for the scientists, because there's been many people that wanted to know my personal opinion based on my extraction as a death and dying, like you said, past lives, near death. It all has to do, and a lot of people are poo-pooing psychics and sages and seers and remote viewers. And I beg to differ, because always they talked before, prior, as an energy being.
It's all part of this. That's why they look for psychics. That's why they recruited us.
But now,
let me ask Bret to ask a question.
Okay, I'll mute.
Redirect this.
You don't have to
Bret.
mute.
Redirect. Huh?
Why are you muting? You don't have to
Don't
mute.
Don't mute.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Redirect us, Bret. Okay, get us back on track. Go ahead.
What's your question?
I want you to redirect us. Keep us on target, because Theresa and I have this dynamics, and we know all this stuff. We're so familiar. So you're like the outsider, and just keep us on track here. Okay?
Man, it's like trying to herd a pack of cats.
I agree. I agree.
Right? No easy task. But so what I find totally fascinating, Theresa mentioned this a little earlier, is that we don't really know exactly what reality is. And so we have a certain history that's spoon-fed to us by the powers that be. At this stage, we know that that's Rockefeller-controlled public education, and they have their own agenda. They're also privy to different sets of information, similar to the Vatican. Vatican's got underground, catacombs full of secret information, including UFOs and aliens and all kinds of stuff down there. So us regular folk out in the world, we don't really know what our true history is, what our place in the universe is. I think most intelligent people will realize that when you look out into the sky, we can't be the only ones, right? So assuming that there's other civilizations out there, why don't we know more about them? And so we're kept in the dark because this certain smaller group of people wants to maintain power for whatever reason. So a real fascinating book that I think kind of blew me open was by Michael Tessarian, his first book called Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation, where beings from another planet, not necessarily a Sitchin scenario, but kind of like a Sitchin scenario, kind of like the equivalent of a William Bramley. It's not really a Sitchin scenario, but there are all three of the books, Sitchin, Bramley, and Tessarian, all kind of describe the same thing, where aliens come at some point in the remote past, and for different reasons, and they decide to genetically manipulate the hominid species that was here in an interventionist evolutionary kind of a theory to create humans, right? And so for one reason or another, or multiple reasons, humans have always been kept in the dark, like we are still children or slaves from one point of view, and we're on a need-to-know basis, and so far we haven't needed to know. So when we get into the stuff like what did presidents know, what did various countries know, whatever, nothing escapes the people that are in control of this world. So whatever information is known, I would guess a high percentage in the 90s is released on purpose by the powers that be, because they want us to know for various reasons, whether it promotes their agendas politically, socially, or with war, or chess moves on the chessboard, so to speak, or this other small percentages stuff maybe get leaked out. So, we were going to have Richard Doty on today, and I had a bunch of questions along those lines where, he's being paid by the government to promote disinformation to a guy, Paul Benowitz, who, from everything that I've read, seemed to be a patriot. He actually wrote a letter to Reagan telling him that, hey, we got this base here in Dulce, and there's not good stuff going on. You need to know about this, right? I mean, that's an American for you right there, looking out for his country and the not just himself but his people. And then so you got guys like Doty coming along and getting paid to mislead this guy. And so like who clearly Paul Benowitz was on the American side. What side is the Air Force on, right? And so just I'll wrap this up. So we don't really know what's going on. The investigations are up to us, and this is why I like to see shows like this. And there's so many different podcasts out there talking about UFO stuff, because it's really from the contactees and the researchers in the civilian world that are going to come up with the answers, because I just don't think we can trust our government to tell the truth. So, I mean, I could talk for hours about this, Janet.
I just wanted to not talk about Richard Doty without him there to talk for himself. I think that's we should wait.
Well, I'm going to have questions for him, so.
Okay, well, that'll be good, and he might,
I mentioned him, Janet. You may not know this, but he's in my book. So when we have Richard Doty on, I would like to talk to him as well. But he told me about his book and another book, too, that he didn't necessarily define himself strictly by the job he had as OSI agent. So what we need to understand is, just like me, I pulled my ear thing out. I wore a uniform and I did contract work. And I like working for the government because they paid well and they have good benefits, right? So most people, you grow up and around people in my family, you could be a truck driver, a car salesman, go be an educator at a school. Northeast, in my case, was, I was told I'd be a mother of children over and over, and I kept saying, no, I'm not going to get married and have children. Of course, I wound up getting married and having children. So we really don't know from the time we're born what we're going to be, and we can change at any time into something else. And I think that's what Richard Doty is doing, is he's recreating his narrative so he can still be a part and support his family, even though he's retired, as I am, from government.
I don't feel comfortable talking about Richard behind his back. Let's just wait till Richard's on.
We're mentioning his name. He's a public figure. He's very much a part of ufology, Janet.
All right, let's talk about something else.
Okay, well, hold on. I don't need to mention Richard's name, but he's representative, TJ's representative of I don't know how many, tens of thousands of government workers that are taking a paycheck, in some cases, to deceive their fellow Americans. Right? So
Well,
is
I
that
don't know about that. I took it. I don't know that that's what it is. When we go into our jobs, we have just like you do. They tell you you're going to go do this. I was in personnel and information security, so my job was to secure government contracts and anybody that came on, including the head of Hawaii, all of intelligence when they flew in. That was my job, to secure personnel and information security. So anything else that you describe other than what's in my Office of Personnel Management file, that's speculation, skepticism, or
Everything
cynicism.
is
So I didn't name
compartmentalized. You're on a
specifically.
need-to-know basis. I was on a military base for a year and a half. I lived there 24/7. There was a lot of extraterrestrial activity going on. I was in a lot of it, but then they do a mind wipe. But over time, that breaks down. At least for me, it breaks down, and they knew it would. And so I started remembering more and more about what I actually did. So I had a front job. I thought it was just a library. I was a librarian. It was like kind of ironic, yeah. But that's because I was alone in this little library that nobody used for hours on end. Then I actually went underground and I had my whole job down there. That happened to Preston Nichols. That was similar to what they did at Montauk. So we've got some correlations there.
So you
But
can prove
think
that, Janet,
I
with
can't
your
prove that.
contractor.
I
You can
can't
prove
My
that.
name is Janet
Yeah,
Lessin.
you've got
And
W-2s as a contractor. You
find
have
how-
paperwork to prove you were there.
I guess I could find some. I did find
Yeah,
some
you
of my
could.
papers from Paloma Services, and I've got to go through them.
Yeah, but why?
My
Who
husband
cares?
decided to clean up the office one day, and I caught him after. I go, "How much of my stuff did you throw away?" Oh, it's been there for 20 years. I go, "Yeah, that was the point." But I've lost a lot of that stuff. We went to the.
I've been throwing away a lot of mine for that reason.
And it wasn't intentional, and I was really upset, but that's okay. That was.
But Bret has been one of these that never took money from the government, and that's the rub here. Is Janet and I are both retired, and we both get a government check. We're both seniors, so we have a check. As many people, baby boomers, there's more people on Earth right now than there's probably ever been or going to be in the future. And why in America there's more baby boomers, but we're letting all these other people come to America, and that's okay with me because of the way that people started America anyway. The only difference is I don't think there's going to be all these jobs just here in America because we have gone global.
Wait. We're getting political here. Let's not do this. Let's stay with extraterrestrials.
Well, I thought we were. You go political when you go extraterrestrials.
There's going to be bleed over at some point, Janet. We don't have to talk Trump Biden, but there's going to be bleed over because political stuff does.
Okay, well, I don't want to get into the immigrants because a lot of
we
my
triggered
friends
Janet. Okay, she's
triggered. I've had workers that were immigrants. They were wonderful. My immigrant workers.
It's a different situation now, though. So it's not just regular immigration. There's a strategic thing going on.
I have my opinion, and you have your opinion. Over here.
Well, that's how we started.
Talk about my opinion.
I said let's immigrants in because we don't have enough people to work the jobs. It's the other thing. It's the other way around. We have a shortage of workers, and we need workers. And you'd think they would come to Hawaii, but no, they don't come to Hawaii. So now the labor has quadrupled, and I can't afford to fix my toilet, right? So we have the reverse problem. And so, if you were to solve this problem about where the population goes, we could very easily have a global database. Everyone would go into it. All the jobs would go into it. All the housing would go into it. And so we would put people where they're needed. I mean, that's what we're going to do. We go to space. That's what
the czars
did. That's what they did on the. Let me talk. I've been listening. When I got recruited,
go ahead.
Work on Johnson Atoll because we need someone with clerical skills. I got recruited, and I went to another country, so to speak. It was a way out in the middle of the ocean, a remote location, top secret military base, and there I was, a little hippie chick, right? So so we could do that with the whole planet. We could say, here's the database. Okay, it doesn't matter where you're from, what color you are. Here's all the jobs that we need done. When we go to space, we're going to do that. We're going to say, we need someone.
We're already in space, Janet.
Right. But when we open up as official, it's going to be, we need this person with this skill set. And we don't care what color you are. Because when I was on Johnson Atoll, everybody was there. Every color. They had Tongans, Fijians. I mean, they had non-American. They had Russians. They had who will match the skill set that we need. and they were on this military base. And they came, and even extraterrestrials.
Guess
So
what? Some
when
people
we,
are.
when we start interacting,
Guess what?
when we
If
start
somebody who
interacting with
doesn't want to talk
extraterrestrials,
politics, be sure
we're
to
going
talk
to
about
go,
politics.
just like Star Trek, we're going to go, who fulfilled that job? And they might be a blob creature like on Orville. They might be a Vulcan, right? So we need to get over our prejudice about that and recruit the people that
Who's
we need
prejudiced?
for the jobs we have.
Who's we?
Yeah,
The world.
who are we? I'm not prejudiced.
Our society, our intergalactic society. And I have
We're
been in
not.
these places. I have been in these places where there was absolutely no
On
prejudice
Earth.
about anything. And you've been there too, Teresa. And you've told me how
I'm
you
not
interacted.
prejudiced, Janet. I have had to stand up in front of
Okay,
psychiatrists for
so-
Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh in a huge auditorium of 3,000 people and defend my honor that he pointed me out of 3,000 some odd people. For a Bhagwan
Right.
Sri Rajneesh crash and burn because he was taking all our people's money and their limos
so,
and their.
yeah.
But I know what it's like to be attacked. But I can stand up for what I believe in, and I'm ready to do it. But I'm telling
Right,
you
so
that
we
when
have
I was
three
in
people there,
space, we
and
didn't
we
have
all
prejudice.
have very different belief systems. And I thought we weren't going to
Obviously.
get political on this show. But I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that
I
say
didn't bring
and
that word
say.
up. We were talking
Get about-
presidents.
Now you start talking about immigration, which is a political issue, and I don't really
So
want to
what?
talk about that.
So we can't be
I
afraid to
didn't-
mention stuff.
I'm not afraid. I'm just going to not get in.
Sitchin?
Okay. No,
Sounds
you
like
were
that.
talking about immigrants. Anyway, let's
Well,
talk
you're
about
just
extra.
letting-
Oh, coming to this world. That's how.
His doubt,
Okay.
and we wouldn't be in this whole big hullabaloo now.
Okay, so let's go back to what it is that you thought it's supposed to be positive. Now,
No, I don't think it's very positive.
and
when
author,
we're
it's
talking
got
about
to be
somebody
because we're in a
who-
positive
a
negative
class of people,
dichotomy.
and that's just a form of prejudice and racism.
You guys
Okay.
can't talk at the same time, okay?
Right.
If someone's talking,
So
let them
let's say
talk.
with extraterrestrials, what we were talking about was
Go ahead, Bret.
presidents. Or presidents that you know
It
did
gets-
what?
it gets- we'll lose viewers if look, we have 0 viewers now because it gets to be too chaotic. If Teresa's going, let Theresa go until there's a natural pause, then interject something. But Janet, when you start talking when Teresa's in the middle of a sentence, it just reduces the chaos. You can't hear either one of you,
Fine.
right? And and we're all adults here. No, this is not a politically centered show, but UFOs involve politics, so it's going to come up at some point. So we can't limit ourselves. We can't talk about politics. It's going to come up. So, you started the whole thing asking about presidents and UFOs. That's political. So,
There's nothing
Okay.
to talk about then.
exactly. So we're going to talk about everything, right?
But I
All
get
right.
to disagree. I don't
can
agree
disagree
with
all
it
you
just
want.
because you agree with it, and I get to have an opinion.
Of course you do. I didn't say you didn't. So,
And that's
Now
what
what?
humans are about. There you go. Because at one time or another, we were all so close to being the same. The story that I learned. Now, this was one of my cases, and Jan, you know Tom pretty well.
Yes, I
so
know
one
Tom.
of the cases about Tom was he told me his truth, which didn't match mine at all. So I had to go learn because that was the case. I was assigned. If people want to read about it, it's right here in this book, Roswell UFO Encounters, which I've never promoted. People say, you wrote a book? And people on Facebook, they have no clue because I've never cared to promote my story. And Tom asked me to wait until I died, that too, but until he died, to come forward because he didn't want to get into what we're getting into right now. He hated to argue. He would not argue. And that man, in 20 years, he never raised his voice to me. He was the most calm person I'd ever seen in my life. Now, one of the best agents and sharpshooters, and from what I was told by him, he had 135 confirmed kills for the government and CIA or Navy or whomever was sending him on his orders or hip pocket orders from Reagan or Bush. And that's the era we lived in. So talking about presidents, That's the one that people, now some people say this isn't about us. This is about all of us on the planet, and I agree. So where I think this story's going in 2024 is into space again. And that's when, in the 1960s, when I was a little girl and Kennedy got shot, and I was in the 7th grade, and we all clapped, and we didn't know why we were clapping because somebody had come in and told the teacher Kennedy got shot. And then we sat there and got barrage for an hour for clapping when we didn't know what we were clapping about because we were dumbass I should have said that. We were just students in the 7th grade, okay? But had I been where my mother wanted us to be, we were going to, believe it or not, they had a Six Flags in Dallas. And we were going to be there that weekend. And I wasn't there. But I immediately thought I knew who did it, okay? I'm just telling you. I know a lot of people.
What did you think?
I don't want to talk about it right now because we're all heated, because they will get into personal opinions. But what I will tell you is that every one of us is entitled to our own opinion about what happened to Kennedy. And that is one of the unexplained mysteries, because I believe at that time what I experienced and why I became an investigator, from that time, that teacher changed my life. I was going to be a writer from the 3rd grade forward after my experiences of death and dying and knowing angels. But after she barraged us about it, and then after I found out what she told us, the person came in and told her, because only a few heard, but those few that heard were apparently from Republican families, I guess, and started clapping him because Johnny Nichols was my boyfriend, and he was in my room, and I loved him. It was a crush in 7th grade. He started clapping, so did I. That was in West Monroe, Louisiana. We had the high school rebels.
Tell us, we all started crying.
Right,
So
and then we all started crying. We did.
We were in the north. You were in the south. What did they do when? Oh, you were too young.
Where were you, Bret?
After the fact, yeah.
Right.
Oh, he was born after the fact.
Yeah.
Really?
Right. Yeah.
Are we
I
that
remember
old?
watching it on an anniversary with my grandparents and my dad and some of my uncles, and I just remember as a little kid just being horrified by seeing even the footage that they allowed the public to see. I was horrified as a young boy.
Right.
So, yeah.
So we all have a place. And then again, when 9/11 towers came down, I heard the backstory. I heard aliens did it. I heard conspiracy theories that people did it. I heard all these insurance people did it because the insurance money. I heard people owed on the building and they did it. And then I heard another one came down and they imploded like plastic explosives. So I heard all that. We weren't allowed to talk about that for 12 years, Janet. I don't even know if it's still allowed.
But I was not letting you talk about it.
Well, people just didn't want us to, as in the press, as senior professional journalists.
When I was right after it happened, I was at a conference and we were talking about how they had they had it set to implode because of the crash that happened in the 80s, where somebody crashed in and the truck hit the pole. And anyway, it was somebody crashed through the front windows, a truck or something, and they were afraid that it would, topple over. So they put the explosives in, so if they ever had to take it down, they could take it down like a demo. So
well, I have a distinct memory.
Right before that, they had a big broadcast in Hawaii about taking down an old building and how they set the charges and it would go in on itself. And then I'd seen one in Pittsburgh right before I left. So I've seen these implosions. And I said, oh, that was a controlled demolition. That was my thought. But when I was in a coma for like 2 days, I was dying. And I don't know why I was dying. I was just deathly ill. I mean, I was so sick, I lost my bowels. And my girlfriend across the island, she was deathly ill. And I think we were in some kind of psychic response to this phenomenon. And I literally woke up, came downstairs, and I go, all we had was a black and white TV, because this is not a TV home. And I had a guest there watching this over and over. And I went, oh my God. I went into my computer and I watched on my computer and I said, oh no, they finally did it. I knew the second it happened, it was an inside job. But what does that mean? That I knew.
Well, let's hear what Bret.
It was not some, yeah. So anyway, we can go into our opinions of that. And I'm sure Bret has an opinion. But then I went to a conference and I forget who it was, the Black Vault guy. It was one of those early conspiracy UFO. Oh, it was over there in California, We were going
You gonna
to
mention a
Victoria
name?
Park. Were you there? You were probably there.
I remember it 2010 at the Fairmont in San Jose, Victoria Jack's last expo.
No, this is
Um,
2011. What was it?
okay,
911.
well, I'm just telling you my experience.
Yeah.
So we were in the vendor room.
9/11. Yeah.
I was talking to Sid Rice, and this guy was coming up, and he had this video camera on him, and he's like, "Hey, you want to see something?" And so Sid and I were both like, "Okay, yeah, sure." And he showed footage of military vehicles hauling away key parts of a plane that didn't fit the narrative, right? It was supposedly was a jetliner that supposedly was steered into the building, right? But when you do the math, you can't bring the plane that big so low to hit the building the way the building exploded. So this particular guy said that it was a small Cessna that came down at a low angle that was loaded with bombs, and it just blew up. So from that moment on, I had questions. I think before, it's hard to remember back that far, but I mean it was back during my college when it happened in 2001, and
Right.
or right after college, right? And so
Everybody has memories, and we know it happened. And my sister worked
Yeah.
with a lot of people because she's a nurse and a lot of her clients, and she's very sensitive about having worked during that time. It took a lot out of her, and she gave a lot up of her life to be with these people that had so much. Some of them got cancer and died after that. Such
Right.
the stuff in the air. So, my sister Brenda would be a good speaker as far as medical and stuff, but she probably wouldn't do it. But she pays homage when necessary. But we're talking about feelings here, and the extraterrestrials. I believe that what I learned from the story I'm going to tell isn't necessarily just my husband's or just other people's from Andromeda galaxy. As some people say, "Oh, you're going to go and represent us from Andromeda," and I'm like, no, not necessarily. I'm going to represent what I know to be my truth. And everybody has theirs, but that doesn't mean I'm any smarter or less. We're all equal because we all create our own life story. So some people may not even know or it happened to them from other countries. So right now we're in this expanse, and I believe that's part of our job is to be here. Just show up. Just show up. Janet and Bret and Theresa, show up and be counted that we have a voice that we can use that so many people in the world can't. And that's what America affords us right now, plus the paychecks that we get from our government. But I get it because I'm retired and have a Social Security check now.
I have a Social
So,
Security check. Yeah.
yeah, that's all I
Yeah.
get, and that's what I have to live on. Or I can get other money, from writing a book here or two. But what's that, Janet? $3 or $5 that we're talking about, to tell our story if people want to know it. But these podcasts are important because we're educating and we're thinking and we're creating a think tank. So, we're inviting everybody. We all know you have a voice, and some of you may want us to talk about it, and others may just be glad to write a book or a novella. And we're all using KDP Publishing and Amazon. Everybody, Lulu is where I put mine because it's easier. But Bret is getting that time where we all have a voice. And you came up with this name, but me and Brenda were seeing you with that little China doll that you were. That ET contactee, you had a 3B bag hanging behind you. What was that bag for?
Oh, you're talking about B3 Sciences. They make blood flow restriction bands for exercising. Yeah.
I've never heard of that. Okay. What is it?
You never heard of that before?
But I thought it was funny that you had come up with TJ3B, and then Brenda and I saw the 3B bag behind you.
There's B3 Sciences is the name of the company that makes blood flow restriction bands. And the idea behind blood flow restriction bands is that you put them in your armpits and then up in your crotch, and it restricts your blood flow when you work out. So what it does is it forces your body out of using oxygen for fuel, and it forces it to use glycogen. And when your body switches to glycogen, it's fast twitch muscles, and it makes your body release a series of hormones, including 3 different kinds of growth hormones, and so that's what it is. So for 20 minutes, you would wear these blood flow restriction bands, work out intensely, and then you're done. And so
Do
it's like,
you use them? Do you have a testimony? Are you a witness?
We're running out of time. Let's focus
I wanted
on
to hear about it.
yeah.
Okay, well, just never time. We'll talk about bodies.
And it's putting the lid on it again. Okay.
We have to wrap it up. It's 55 minutes into the show.
Okay.
So how do we want to end this show?
Well, I can think of some very comedic ways to end it.
We were talking about your armpits and the crotch the last I heard from Bret, but Janet says, no, don't go there.
Well, I just thought we should stay on top. There's a thing that they in chats, off topic. It's like, off topic.
I don't see anybody.
Well, anyway, no.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so Rainbow Body said much love. So, oh my God, David came on tonight, y'all. So thank you, David. Janet, did you notice David came on?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, well, why didn't you bring him on? I don't get it. I called him and told him.
He said he was,
I'm going to start producing so I can bring on people,
he
Janet.
said he wasn't feeling great. He would have said, I want to come on. He didn't say what though. I just said hi.
He could have told us, well, who's this Rainbow Body? So, folks, there's all kind of ways to produce and do things, and we all three are producers, and we all have our own shows. So we'll introduce you to some other people, and we hope you come back and enjoy us. But we're all trying to be equal and learn how the power of three works. And I like the magic and synchronicity of team players. And so it's okay to say we will agree to disagree. And I am an independent voter, so I'm very much on the bipartisan because I'm a journalist. And so how say you, Bret Lueder?
Yeah, I agree. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and we should be able to have civil discourse no matter what the topic is. And
Janet?
Yeah.
What say you, Janet?
I don't know what to say.
Okay, well, everybody is entitled to their own opinion,
Everybody's
and we are
entitled
white.
to their opinion, and so whatever.
But we still have free speech. But there are a lot of these people taking it away in the other countries right now. So please be aware that when we vote this year, I don't care how you vote. If you're American and you have that freedom, I don't know if they took it away in certain states, felonies or not. But this is the time of year you need to be thinking about if you're an American. But there's other countries voting too, including India has votes now. So what's funny, we were talking about when we were kids, do y'all remember we didn't have ability to think about other countries other than what was in our geography book? And I think that's one thing that the extraterrestrial group and what we all three have been promoting in our lifetimes, and the UFO disclosure movement and the alienology movement. And I think alienology is catching on because of AI. So I plan on bringing up the AI and where we're going in the future. For any of you guys that are into all that futuristic stuff, I like to talk about that and what I think and what's happened to us. What happened to the Jetsons, folks? Remember when we were kids and we thought we were going to be flying around in all these cars, and we're just now talking about electrical vehicles, EV on the news? Where's the flying cars? Where did they go?
Hijacked. This is not the future that we were imagining.
That's what I'm saying.
Our future.
Yeah, so who hijacked it?
Because we were on a trajectory. Well, that's what this whole thing is about. Who's in control of the narrative? Who captures the narrative and creates it and takes it in the direction that they want it to? Bret said earlier, we're allowed to say things because it's been permitted. But there's always these people hijacking our reality and taking it to the direction they want it. Okay, so just be aware of that. Now, what can we do about it? Part of
the president's
we're going to be on here and do a positive show and see if we could take it into a positive direction. And my intention was nothing bad or to censor you, but to keep it positive. I don't like to criticize people that aren't here and they can't defend themselves. It's called gossip. I'm a highly trained psychotherapist that have run groups for 25 years, and we don't gossip about somebody that's not there so they can defend themselves. That's one thing. And we don't get into things about minorities and other races, because I think this is just racism. Racism is racism is racism. And when you're interjecting something about you don't like the immigrants, then you're just being racist. So that's
I didn't
what
say that.
do
I did not say
on our
that.
show is
And
anyway. After that,
Janet,
and
I
this is what you
swear.
said. I just wanted to stop. I felt you were going into the direction that I don't think you should
I
be
would
talking
never
about.
say that. Are you kidding
I
me? You
know.
know how many colors I've been in past
They
lives?
don't realize when they're insensitive to other groups. Now, I work in one of the most diverse. I live in one of the most diverse places on the planet.
Yeah, you're a
Everybody
white
comes.
Hallie. You're a white
So,
Hallie, and
yeah,
I live there
and you go
too.
to the
I know
things
what
and
it's like to
every
be a
nationality
minority.
is there. I've had every national. have every nationality on my property. I mean,
So
people
what?
that. So I'm saying I live in a very diverse part of the world. When I was a child and I lived in Pittsburgh, I never saw an Asian. I rarely saw. I didn't see a black person until I was about 5 years old, and I cried because I thought, "Mommy, why is that person burnt?" That's how segregated it was. I didn't even see a black person in North Pennsylvania until I was like,
But if you just call them
I didn't
people, then you don't
understand
worry
it.
about their skin color or their nationality. They're just
That
people.
so we have to be hypersensitive about when we're being insensitive. And I'm
But
very
Janet,
aware because
you're
I
not a
am a
psychoanalyst on this show. You're a co-host with us talking about
well, that's okay.
TJ3B,
I'm expressing my opinion, and you're
but you're
disagreeing.
calling us out
I'm
when we're
saying we
talking.
need to not talk
You
about
ask about the
immigrants because
presidents.
the immigrants is a key word, and it's like you don't need to talk about immigrants on a show about extraterrestrials. Anyway, I'm going to go now because
You don't
it's
think?
11:05. Let's wrap this up. No, I'm not real happy
Well, let Bret have the
right
last word.
now.
Bret,
Whatever. I mean,
All right.
so
Well,
what?
this has been
This is
a
degraded.
fascinating foray into interesting stuff. Really, I think this is actually a really good episode. We need to, all three of us need to be ourselves, and as all three of us are ourselves more and more, it gets more interesting. So not put off by
well,
anything
that's
that was
positive.
discussed tonight. And I think this is one example of civil discourse. It might be
Yes.
uncomfortable for some people. It might not, but issues need to be discussed, and true feelings need to come out, and people need to be sincere. So while I may disagree with Janet, I appreciate her willingness to share her feelings about certain subjects, and I applaud her for that. And same with you, Theresa, and hopefully when I talk about my stuff, I'll have support from you too as well. So I think with that said, we'll look forward to a guest next week. I think
Are we? I don't know that we
Yeah,
are. I think we're going to have to book them. I'm going to have to book.
Geraldine Orozco. She's fascinating.
yeah, she is very. I look forward to
Geraldine,
talking
I
to
like
her.
her.
You know,
Okay, so
Beautiful
next
girl. Beautiful
Next
girl.
week is Geraldine
I've had-
Orozco, and you guys can all look forward to seeing her on the TJ3B Triangle. And we want to thank you all for tuning in. And until next week, from Allied
aloha.
Command, namaste.
Blessings. Okay, bye,
next
guys.
week.